So we're going to start with Deanna. She's in her home right now. And Deanna, do you want to walk us out to your studio?
I do. Thanks for joining me, everybody. This is exciting. Welcome to Door County, Wisconsin. I'm going to take you on my commute to my studio. It's a little further than it used to be, but as you can see, that's my old studio, the little white building there. And then this tiny building was my kiln room up until last November. So now we'll head out to my new studio. I live in a quintessential Door County farmhouse. It was built in the 1800s. And, I've been here about 16 years. Door County is a peninsula north of Chicago, about 4.5 hours north. And it has over 300 miles of shoreline. It's absolutely gorgeous. So if you're looking for a vacation place, this is perfect in the summer. Don't come here in the winter. I go to Duncan. So you can start to see my new studio here, which is quite the upgrade. I absolutely love it. You can see the front of the building. There's some sconces that I created for the outside. I've done several pair of sconces. They're a fun project for me. They really enhance the pets of air because the light shows all the colors in the casting. Here's my new sign. Should go up any day now. I just finished making it. On the walls, you can see some glass drapery studies that I've done. They started when I started making the heads. Kind of went hand in hand. In here, I have a very beautiful space. It's nice to be able to see work on display in a clean space before it goes out to a gallery. And I also clear this space out and use it for teaching workshops. I just did my first safe distance workshop in here and it worked out really well. We already wear masks, so that's been done. On this side, you can see I have lots more windows, which is fantastic. Some of you are familiar with these types of pieces. I have another drapery study here in the corner. And these are all made out of glass and copper mesh. I have a printmaking press here, which I haven't had the opportunity to use too much yet. I think that's going to be a retirement program. On the shelves here, you can see there's lots of castings, lots of bowls for my workshops. I do demos for every workshop. And then there's several types of head castings. And these are all things that I look at and think about how I want to use them in the future. There's some sconces on the shelf there. On this next shelf, you'll see my glass. I use bullseye glass. They have a wonderful palette of colors and almost everything is compatible, meaning it won't crack when used together. I've been using it for over 20 years. And then I have a lot of molds. I use molds for everything I do. So that's always a big storage issue. I keep my equipment use simple, keeps my overhead low. I plan my work in a way that doesn't require a lot of overhead, which is helpful in times like this for sure. So I have a grinding wheel for finishing pieces. And again, my glass. I have several pieces in progress. Just some samples of the molds with castings in them that haven't been broken out yet. This is my soldering bench, which I spend a lot of time at. Everything I do is assembled by soldering and electroplating. And this is the electroplater. It's not beautiful, but it's very, very effective. So you have a large tank in the back, which is the actual plater. This is what puts copper onto the glass. It goes to this platform when it comes out of the plater and gets rinsed with distilled water. And that goes back into the bath. And then it goes here where it gets rinsed with tap water for the final cleaning. And that water goes into limestone, which neutralizes the acid so it can go into the soil and be safe. You can see here, this is my wax pot, which I spend a lot of time working with wax. Almost everything I do is made with wax, except for the actual heads. I model them in clay. These are some vessel halves. This is what they look like before I start carving them. And they're all full for plaster molds, so I have to store so many molds. And then my simple drill press and distilled water maker. Here I have my mold making bench. I spend a lot of time here also. I make my molds here. I break my molds out after they come out of the kiln. This is to show you not everything turns out. I'm pushing the envelope with these pieces, and this one just came out, and I didn't get a whole bunch of it. So I will have to start all over again. This was created for this head. It would sit in here like so, but obviously, it's not going to be strong enough. So back to the drawing board on that one. So everything that I make is fired in ceramic kilns. And this is what the kilns are like. They're just a standard ceramic kiln. So that is my studio. That's where the magic happens.
It's amazing that you can get all that done in that one space. And I know that you made it seem like you just walk around the studio and create a piece just by going from station to station.
Uh-huh.
But we just saw on your table, we saw a few ladies in progress, sculptors, and I think we're going to pull up something that can show in more detail how those are created.
I was inspired to start with glass because there's no rules. It was just freedom in the studio. Nobody was hovering over you telling you how to do something. You could experiment. There's so many ways to work with it, and you can experiment and find new ways that nobody's done before. I went to college for art. My actual degree is in art history, and I studied all sorts of vessels from all sorts of cultures and was able to use that for the initial designs of the vessels. The art history degree actually helped me with the aesthetic of this work, being that it has that antiquity quality to it, looking like it has a past. After getting comfortable with working on the vessels, you become proficient with the technique, and then you're able to experiment and bring your own designs in. When you do pâte de verre, at least the way that I do it, I work with wax. So I'll create a wax form of a vessel, and that will be a canvas for me to carve on, add textures to. And then once the mold is made, there's another canvas where you get to apply color and do it in a very painterly fashion. The heads were tricky because I wasn't planning on doing the head. So it was kind of like solving a puzzle. Eventually, I went to just casting the entire head in solid glass and electroplating copper onto portions of it, which would allow me to patina it and add some color to the piece and more texture. And that was effective, but it was losing the pâte de verre. My current body of work embodies the two things that I love the most, which is people and pâte de verre. I'm excited to see them together. The most exciting thing to me, I think, is the chance. You know, you create the form and you create the mold and you put your glass in, and when you fire it, it might not fill all the way in a certain place. You don't know how it's going to come out. That is the most exciting thing when it comes out, and it's not exactly what you thought it would be, but it's better because it's chance and it's organic. And I love it when the copper grows through the glass because of the mesh that's inside and creates all these little nodulars that are coming through the glass. Things that I couldn't have planned that are just happening because of all the processes. I'm lucky that I have a passion to do what I do. I've had short times when I wasn't able to do what I wanted to do as far as making my work, and I know how important it is to me to make my work. It's what my life is about.
Thank you, Deanna. Did you start sculpting in any other medium before you started in this particular type of sculpting?
Only in college. You know, you try all different kinds of mediums in college. You know, I did bronze, plaster, wood, but glass definitely took my heart for sure.
And did you start figurative work or abstract?
I did actually figurative work in college. As a matter of fact, I did figurative things my whole life. I drew faces all the time when I was a kid, and that was my passion, was the face. And when I started working with the vessels, I kind of left that behind for a long time, probably 20 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
We're going to see another process film about how you create your vessels, which requires this really large sculpting before you make your molds. And the vessels are what you're known for primarily at this point, or historically, right?
Yeah.
The figures are newer.
They're new within the last 7 years, which is not a long time.
Right.
So
Right.
getting your work out there.
So we're going to cue up this next film, which is showing the process of creating these large vessels. And then you're going to also explain a little bit about the electroplating, I think, as well.
Yeah, that's in there. I will cover it. Okay. So every vessel that's made is designed first on paper, and it has to be created in clay. The positive shapes are created in clay. So what you're looking at there is the profile of the bottom of a vessel, and I'll run that around that pole over clay repeatedly until it forms the perfect shape. I'll keep going until it's perfectly smooth. So there, the bottom half is done of that piece, and I'll make a plaster mold of that and then create the top. So that's the top half of it being done. And they have to match up exactly in order to be able to be fitted together. So that's the plaster mold with the clay inside, and I'll pull all that clay out and soak that mold in water. Once the mold is soaked in water, you can pull a wax from that, which is what I showed you on the table earlier. You can make as many waxes as you want from a plaster mold as long as it is soaked in water. So those two halves are ready to be carved, texture added to. That's them sitting on top. I'm making sure that they fit one another correctly. So that's the wax having texture added to the surface. That's one way to work with it. That's a wax where I'm carving the entire thing, which is a very fun way to work. Very zen. A mold has to be made after the wax is finished being carved or created, and the plaster and silica are able to accept the glass and go into the kiln and be taken to a high temperature. That chicken wire is put in there so it doesn't crack and break apart while it's firing. After that, you pick out the colors that you want to use. And like I said before in the other presentation, it's like having a blank canvas, and you can be very painterly about it. That's me on the floor with a giant mold, and I do the colors in layers. I usually do at least 4 colors in a piece. So each layer is sifted in with a tablespoon. It takes hours, and then it goes into a kiln and gets fired. It's in the kiln for about 3 days. When it comes up, I have to watch it really closely so it doesn't slump. And then the halves get electroplated. That's my electroplater, as I showed you earlier. That puts the copper onto the piece. That there is a copper bar that's in a basket in the acid, and that will break down to a molecular level and redistribute onto the glass wherever the glass has been painted with an electroconductive paint. So that's the halves. It's painted on the edge and ready to go into the plater.
By painted, do you mean
I
crushed?
literally paint it with an electroconductive paint. It's a paint that has metal in it, so it will conduct electricity. And what you're seeing here now is after it was painted, wires are attached to it, so you get an electrical charge going to the paint. And the copper that breaks down in the bath, that's the piece in the bath, the copper is breaking down to a molecular level and redistributing onto that piece wherever that paint is on. And the wires are conducting electricity. So that's after it's been plated on the edge. Then I sit the two, one on top of the other, and I have to fit it. And after that, I'm going to solder those pieces together. I solder the two halves together, and then I'm soldering in copper mesh along the joint. Once that's done, it's going to go back in the plater and get plated with copper again to cover the joints, build up the copper, and make it strong. And that's the finished piece. And that is me incorporating the copper mesh into the glass. I absolutely love this technique. I think it's aesthetically beautiful. The orchid man showed up at my house and he had a roll of copper mesh in his hand, and I asked him for a piece because I knew that copper is compatible with glass, and he gave me the whole roll. And after that, I started playing with it and incorporating it in the work, at first aesthetically, but it's just beautiful.
I love that.
Me too.
So Deanna, how did you just said that the incorporation of the mesh was a real accident, but you were working with Pat DeVere prior to that?
Oh yeah, I've been working with Pat DeVere for years, and I actually would create netting textures on my vessels. I've always used netting texture in my work forever. And so that's why when I saw copper netting, I got so excited because I was like, this is my thing. So I wasn't sure how it would look in the glass, and it does turn black because it oxidizes, but I like it. I think it looks fantastic.
And have you tried to use any other type of netting either?
I haven't, because as far as I know, there isn't another metal that could go in to the glass and not crack it. I really haven't researched it, but that's my understanding.
This is a great time. If anyone has any comments or questions, we'd love to direct them to Deanna. And then, let's see, we have one from Marion Rich. Marion noticed a rose mold on the table. How and where are they applied to the headpiece?
Are you referring to these? Yes, they're beautiful, aren't they? These are what I put onto my heads. And you will see in the next video the process of this. And I actually solder these on one at a time.
Wow. Also from Linda Green, Mary, let's see. Are you applying the glass frit with your bare hands? It looked like it, and Linda is wondering if the frit is sharp since it's glass.
It is, I do use my hands all the time, and it's frit. So it's sintered glass, and it's not very sharp. Every once in a while, you'll get a little poke, but it's not like touching a broken piece of plate glass. It's
And
more like coarse sea salt.
oh wow.
Yeah,
And that is made from the color that you showed us in the jars in your
yeah.
studio. Okay.
This is all done with bullseye colors. I use some powders, and I use a size 1 frit and a size 2 frit. So it goes from like powder to granulated sugar to coarse sea salt.
Let's see. So all the pieces that you showed us in your studio, I think we have some close-ups of those so you can see them,
Yeah,
including the sconces that were on the front of the building and on the shelves there. So we're going to get some close-up photos of those. And again, if anyone has questions about those pieces as you're going through, feel free to type a question. And Deanna, if you could talk about the inspiration of those works also as they come up, that'd be awesome.
absolutely,
Yeah, because I know each one has a personal meaning to you.
for sure. Okay, well, these are the sconces for my new building, which that has a lot of personal meaning for me because this studio is my dream come true for sure. Yeah, the sconces I really enjoy because they show off all the texture, but they also show off the color so much because the vessels are beautiful and they don't need a ton of light, but the sconces constantly have this beautiful light behind them, just emanating everything that's going on.
I love that you were able to play with the texture and the design quite a bit in those.
Yeah, really fun. I love to carve glass. Well, carve wax becomes glass. Okay, this is one of the heads in progress, and I love the movement in her torso and the sweet face. This one I created the torso first and then created the head to go with what the torso was doing. Has a nice movement to it, it's graceful. Contrary to that, this one I created the head first, and then I had to create a torso to work with what the head was doing. And I keep doing this where I go back and forth. The figures for me have a really strong physical presence, but they also have this wonderful ephemeral lightness to them. They're really, really lovely. I'm very excited about them. This piece is very unique. This is something I actually made for myself. It's called Missing Memories, and it is about my mother who developed Alzheimer's. And her family was always first. And this piece is her forgetting to hold her nest up and losing her memories. This is an amphora. This was designed to fit a specific type of space, which really forces you to be creative in executing and designing. I really enjoy that. And I really like the netting that I used in the top of the piece. It's definitely one of the earlier ones I did that with.
And what about the foot on that piece?
That's a piece of cast glass that has copper plating on it. It's pretty. This is a large vessel that was created as a showpiece. I picture it for the center of like a dining room table, and it was inspired by an inlaid wood table that I saw.
So how difficult is that when you have a large piece like that and you have to electroplate each piece separately? It's 24 inches wide and deep.
Yeah, that's definitely as big as I can go in diameter with my electroplater. The bigger challenge for me is physically lifting those molds because the molds are wet when you're working with them and when you're putting the glass in, and they're really heavy, and I work alone. So they're very hard on me physically to make large pieces. This is a deeper view piece. It's just a beautiful collaboration of color. It's a very calming piece. I love it. This piece is cast, it's hard to explain this, but this piece is cast as one casting other than the foot. Most every other piece that you see, I've done in 2 parts. And this was all done as one.
And why did you decide to put the wire on the exterior in that? And now you have the carving on the interior we're seeing.
Yeah, well, I didn't like the surface of the outside of the glass as much because it got fire polished, so it was real shiny. I'm not a shiny glass person. So I put the mesh on the outside and plated it to get some movement. And then the inside is carved with a nice subtle carving.
Beautiful
That
texture.
is done with like 3 molds at one time. It's really complicated. Okay, this is a more traditional form. I love the texture on this. It enables you to separate color really nicely. It's a lot of texture going.
And when you made this mold, you showed earlier, you're applying the textured pieces.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly what that is. Again, with this beautiful texture, the piece goes back in on itself at the top, so the texture continues inside, which is really cool. But I also included copper mesh in the glass on the inside, and I included copper mesh in the opening. So that combines those. Okay, this head is an example of the last series of heads that I did. It's solid cast glass, and then it's electroplated with copper and patined. It was a serious body of work, and it was at a time in my life when I had teenagers that were figuring things out, and that look was pretty familiar to me. And this is just a brilliant blue color with snippets of orange at the top, which I love how they pop through those holes. And then again, there's netting connecting the 2 pieces, and that's patined blue as well. I love this vessel. It is at Dunkin's right now, and it has everything I love about the Pat de Bear. The folds and the copper mesh and the color, it almost looks like fabric when it's lit really strongly.
And you did use fabric, didn't you, on this piece to create it?
Yeah, I did. I used fabric that I dipped in wax and applied to the surface of the forms, the wax forms. The way it translates in the glass, it doesn't come off as just a direct representation of fabric. It's beyond that. The copper mesh in this one really allowed me to push the envelope on the openings. You can see that there's really large openings in the glass, and that copper mesh is what makes it strong enough to have integrity, structural integrity. There's a similar piece at the gallery also that's round, similar coloration and mesh.
So when you're doing the interior pieces, like the piece that we just
Yeah.
saw, is that an additional mold that you have to build with the interior?
I have done it with additional molds. That particular one, I believe, was cast as one piece, one mold. The inside of that and up around the top was one mold. This is another example of the awesome folds and how the color gets separated. The wire mesh and the colors just complement each other so great. The coloration, in my opinion, of this one is really dynamic. Again, the mesh gives me the integrity to have big gaps in the glass. This is the same piece from above. The interior is stunning with the copper mesh that's incorporated in the firing of the glass. This is a very large piece, and working with the aesthetic of the folds and the mesh and the surprising strength made me realize that this particular aesthetic was going to work for the heads, with these new heads with the torsos. The drapery studies in Pat de Bear started with the heads, so that was probably 7 years ago. I really enjoy them. I kind of made them for myself. You can see the copper mesh in them as well.
Those are beautiful.
I think so too. This one I absolutely love. It's very sculptural, and the colors really enhance the form. And I love teaching at Duncan's. That's a happy place.
This was a great class that we had with Deanna this spring, I believe, this past spring.
I think I've taught 2 years there, and it's been really, really fun. I'm hoping to be back.
We hope to have you.
The workshop that I do there is very user-friendly. You don't need any experience at all. I teach you about working with the wax form and how to carve it and add texture to it. And then we learn how to make molds. Thank you. The glass part uses the crushed glass that I just showed you, the frit. I don't use hot glass, so if you're intimidated by a furnace, it's a really nice introduction to working with glass.
And Lauren, who directs our DMG school project, says it's so fun and that we love you.
That's so sweet. It's really fun to do. No matter how many times I've done this class, I have never seen a bowl that looks like another bowl. It's amazing how creative people are. And we do wear masks, so we got that going on. I fire the bowls for the students, and then you can have copper plated on the edge if you choose to after the bowl comes out, and you can take a look at it. This is a sample of a bowl right out of the kiln. It's not even cleaned up yet, but very cool. You can check with Duncan's to see when they'll be having me back. Thanks.
Marion says she had a wonderful time in the class. Thank you, Deanna. We have a question from Anthony Cohen. He asked, what is it that caused the figure on the counter that you showed us to break, and what part of your process is particularly risky?
Trying to go vertical is what causes the problems. If you can picture it, when I put the glass in here, this mold was this way. So if you look in there, I'm trying to get this glass to go straight up and down and stay in place until it starts to melt. And as the mold, you have to dry the mold out first. And as that mold dries, some of the glass will start to fall. So it's really, really straight up and down. I knew I was pushing it.
And so do you have to redo that mold now?
I will have to recreate the clay body. I'll have to redo the whole thing. I will start over on that torso, but that's the way it goes. It's glass.
So in relation to the figures, Bruce Bendoff also has a great question. He asks, do you use particular people as models for your beautiful heads?
I don't use particular people. I think that my childhood passion of drawing faces, it started me with taking visual inventory of details of people's faces. I definitely have always observed it. I'm the kind of person that can watch a movie and pick out every actor from another movie because I remember the face. So
could you do a portrait, do you think, if you wanted to?
I could try it. I haven't done one. It's interesting to me because people bring more to, if you know a person, it brings more to that person. So sure. I would certainly try it.
Sure. We have a question from Susan. How tall and how heavy are the heads on the torsos?
It varies. This one's a little heavier. I would say this one is around 7 pounds. The other two are a little lighter.
But the total of the sculptures isn't that much, actually.
The total weight of the sculptures?
Correct.
It's not that much. They're very easy to move around. I always lift them by the shoulders.
Duncan also asks, how are the sconces mounted, and how will you make the next one stronger? Oh.
The sconces? I actually buy commercial hardware from Bullseye for sconces. I don't do that part myself. So, and I've had sconces on my buildings for years and years and not had any problem.
Are they mounted on hooks, or how
Oh,
do
they're
you
mounted
affix?
on a hardware. So it's this hardware that I buy from Bullseye.
Okay.
And I usually incorporate copper in the glass so that I can attach them. See,
We have a
they're
question from Karen asking, oh, I'm sorry. How will you make the next torso stronger that broke? How will you remedy that?
I will have to compromise a little bit and change the shape a little. It'll have to flare out a little more as it comes down. Yeah, make it more of a,
So that's
yeah, I really just tried to go too straight up and down. But I
what's
still
the
want to
typical
do the
height
narrow.
on these pieces? I'm sorry.
You're fine.
What's the typical height on those pieces, Deanna?
They're about 20 inches high.
Okay. Definitely, you have to relate the strength to the height and the design. That's all
Yeah,
part of the
they're
process.
amazingly, they're really strong. I shipped one to Canada recently and yeah, no, I feel really secure with these. Absolutely. It works.
So you've taken the figures and the wrapping, and you're kind of experimenting with that and moving in yet another direction, correct? Another new body.
This is definitely where I want to go with the work. I love making vessels. I've been doing it for over 25 years now. But this is very exciting for me to be able to evolve like this.
So I think we're going to see one more presentation about your new body of work.
Yeah, this will show in detail how they go from start to finish, so you have more visuals.
I'm just amazed at what you're creating in that studio.
You should have seen my old studio. Yeah. Okay, what you been up to? Everybody's asking me that, and this is what I've been up to. Creating these new heads. So what you're looking at here on the left is clay that I've been forming into the shape that I want the torso to be. And when I was thinking of these pieces, I was very inspired by Gustav Klimt, if that makes sense to anybody. On the right at the top, you see the waxed fabric that I'm wrapping around, creates movement. The bottom right is a picture of the mold that I cast. It's upside down and ready to receive the glass in it. Again, you can see there's a lot of challenges to get the glass to stay in that shape. So here I did my layers of colors, and then I put in the copper mesh, and then I have to do a thick layer of clear. That white glass is actually clear glass that I'm putting in there fairly thick and slowly building it up the sides. And that will go into the kiln and get fired. Now this image, it has just come out of the kiln and I broke the mold off of it. It still has mold material on there. So I cleaned it up, and then it's gonna go in the electroplater for several days. And this is what it looks like when it comes out of the electroplater. The copper mesh has built up on the edges, but it's also built up in the glass, which is why I have the structural integrity that I need. This copper mesh that I have now is not the initial copper mesh that I found. This is a thicker mesh, so it holds up much better in the firings and has enough sustenance to it that I can plate it afterwards and it will build up. So that is not a pretty picture. But on the left there, I start modeling the clay to go with the shape of the torso. The top right, I'm getting a little further. Bottom right, she's where I want her to be. So after that is done, I take the clay off the torso and I have to make a mold of it and cast it in the glass. So Top right is the mold. I'm breaking it off the glass after it was cast. Bottom right is her face. So that's me pulling all the little waxed fabric things out of the mold. And the top right is the castings as they come out of the mold after they've been fired. The bottom right is me. I put some of the copper mesh over the glass head, and then I will solder all these little castings onto that copper mesh. It comes like a hat. So that's the whole head piece. I took it off the head, and you can see it looks like a hat upside down. And I can then put that in the electroplater and build it up and make it strong. And there it is on her head. She's looking good. And that's from the back, which is just as interesting as the front, in my opinion. Ta-da! Okay. I can't hear you, Mary.
I think personally, and other
There we go.
people think your work is very exciting. We love the direction you're going in. And we want to thank everyone for coming. Deanna, we really look forward to your coming to see us really soon, doing another class and bringing more wonderful work. And I know, Duncan, you want to say goodbye to everyone. And there you go. Next week, we'll be visiting the New Hampshire studio of Thomas Spoon.
Nice.
Well, I want to
Thanks.
thank everybody for coming. Deanna, that was wonderful. I'm really fascinated how you're doing these new sculptures. They're wonderful. And to get a better understanding of what you're doing, thank you very much. I want to thank everybody for being here. And thank you for doing all of this. Hope to see you contact us about the work. We have some really beautiful examples, as you saw some of the pieces that she has. So we hope to hear from you, and thank you very much for being here. And come visit us when we see Thomas Spoon.